We're going to talk about behavioral responses and how we respond from different points of view, how they make a difference in the way we work together, and how different type of responses can create conflict. One of the things I'm reminded of is working with an organization not long ago who had taken on another company in terms of a merger. These two companies had merged together. And one of the things that happens in mergers, and some of you may be familiar with that or have been involved in a merger, I've done workshops mostly when I ask people to raise their hand if you've been involved in a merger or an acquisition, and inevitably there's 2/3 of the organization or 2/3 of the audience will raise their hand that they've been involved. Mergers and acquisitions are tough. One of the reasons is because the two cultures are coming together to try to form one culture. But what happens in most mergers and acquisitions is that we don't take into consideration what those two different cultures are and how they affect the different people, what the styles are of the different people. When we look at managers and merging management people together, we look at their credentials, we look at their pedigree, we look at their experiences, but very seldom do they look at their styles and what their styles are and how are they going to be compatible with people coming in from another company. This creates a lot of problems, and statistics indicate that most mergers and acquisitions fail within the first 5 years. Generally, it's not because their products are not compatible or they don't have a good strategy. It's generally because they can't merge the two cultures together and don't know how to avoid the conflict that is there between those two cultures. So let's look at a little bit about how different styles, the D, the I, the S, and the C, and how they respond to different situations. In your handout, you'll look and you see you've got one called Behavioral Styles Responses. If we look at time, one of the things we notice about time, how different styles look at time. The high D people who are the D traits and characteristics as their primary style, they have an urgency. They want to get things done. They're ready to go. They're results oriented, as we've talked about, and so they're ready to work. I's fall in the area of impulsive. High I's, in terms of time, they're ready to get stuff done. The other side of the coin on time with I's is that because they are so people oriented, they have a challenge with staying on track. They use a lot of time in relationships and sometimes not enough in getting the tasks done. If we look at the S, high S's, they're very sensitive to time, but they're not in a hurry. The S's and the C's are both in that category. They need time, they need information, they want to know what we're going to do, how it's going to work, and given an opportunity to plan out a step-by-step process. So you can begin to see that if we have a team that have the different styles working together, which we do, you can come into some conflict right away with just how are we going to work together with things. You've been in committee meetings and you've been in projects where there's an urgency to get something done, and you've got several people on your team that are wanting more information and want to be sure that we get it right and are hesitant at moving forward. And it has a lot to do with the styles that they're come from. Creates conflict. Another one is on communication, and we talked a little bit about that earlier when we went through the D and the I and the S and the C traits and characteristics, is that high D's are direct communicators. High C's are also direct communicators. They have a tendency to say what's on their mind and they put it right out on the table. The I's and the S's are more indirect communicators. When I mean indirect communicators, I mean that they want people to understand what they're talking about, but they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. They're very sensitive in relationships. I worked with a company one time that the manager asked me, he said, I've got one of my staff members and I can't get them to do what they're supposed to be doing in their job, and they just won't do it. And I said, well, have you sit down and talked to them about it? And they said, oh yeah, we've talked to them. I've talked to them a couple of times. I said, well, did you explain to them exactly what they needed to do and how they needed to do it? And he said, I've done that. He said, I've done that twice, and still they're not doing it right. So I said, well, let me talk to them. So I went and talked to the staff member, and I asked the question. I said, have you had a meeting with your boss and talk about what you're supposed to do? He said, oh yeah, we've had a couple of those meetings. I said, well, did he explain to you exactly what you needed to do? He said, yeah, he did. He said, and I said, well, he said, I'm doing it. I said, you're doing it? He said, yeah, I'm doing exactly what he said. And I said, well, we need to have a meeting together. So I got them together, and we started going over what their tasks were and what the instructions were. And it boiled down to the fact that the manager was a high S style of person, where he thought he was given instructions specifically about what to do, but wasn't real clear. He was going kind of around the bush in the instructional process. The person receiving the communication was a high D style, very direct in communication. Never understood this going around the bush information, never got it. So whereas the manager thought they were being real clear, the staff member never really did understand what he was trying to get at. Didn't want to hurt his feelings. So we got that ironed out. But you can begin to see how styles and how different behaviors make a difference in creating conflict. In that situation, a tremendous amount of conflict occurred because of the miscommunication and understanding. Change, how do we handle change? If you look at there, we're talking about Ds, they're very change oriented. A lot of times Ds are ready to move on before we're even gotten our solid foundation in place to move to the next step, but they're ready to go. I's, they like a lot of variety. They have a hard time sometimes staying focused. The S's and the C's generally don't like change. They like to get things ironed out, get it running well, and then continue to get it moving step by step. Fear, we talked a little bit about fear. High D's have a little vulnerability in that they are so direct and they are very motivated to get results, but they're really conscious about being taken advantage of. They're concerned about somebody pulling something over on them, so that's one of their fears. They sometimes don't get into a relationship rapidly because they want to feel out and be sure that they don't get taken advantage of. High I's, social approval is so important for them. They're so people-oriented, they have to be real careful that they don't neglect getting the job done for fear of hurting somebody's feelings. High I managers have a tendency to not do discipline well in their organization. And as a result, it hurts the whole organization because there's not the discipline there to get the job done. The S's and the C's, the S's are very security oriented. So communications and things that upset the security, as in this mergers and acquisitions, create a lot of fear, create a lot of anxiety and conflict if they don't know what's going on. The C's, they're very sensitive, if you will, of their work, criticism of their work, and we talked a little bit about that because they're so perfectionistic. Focus, again, we've talked about the D's have the big picture focus. The I's are people-oriented and focused. The S's, they have both a people and a task. They're kind of a good combination of people and task, if you will, in their orientation and focus. The C's are task-focused. They want to work on the task and stay with the task.